All right, so welcome to, I believe this is the 10th, possibly 11th Light on the Horizon webinar. I am so thrilled that we now have a YouTube channel and that there's an accompanying list of the speakers who've been on here, Kimberly, Chantal, Gabriela, Linda Pettit, who are all available to activists in particular on a pro bono basis, depending on the practitioner. And as the YouTube channel goes out, I think it's going to be nice that people can get to see who these people are. And then, of course, people are available at all times for consulting and coaching and working with organizations and schools and businesses. Kimberly just did a retreat for the government on the Isle of Wight, for example, about the climate crisis. So I just see that as so exciting to bring the principles into how communities respond, you know. And so I like that communities can respond. It doesn't have to be the federal government and the Trump administration. It can be our community. How does our community respond? And that feels way more doable and empowering at this moment. We basically have guest speakers now. We haven't always had. Oh, shoot, I forgot to turn off my phone. And sometimes we don't have guest speakers. Sometimes we just get together and have a chat together, guided by these three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. I don't know if Gabriela will speak to them, but they are on, I think, webinar 1 and webinar 2 and some of the other webinars. But if, you know, Gabby might speak to them depending on who's on the call today. And then we just, you know, sort of have a chat. It's very organic, it's very free flowing. And please feel free to introduce your difficult questions and concerns, or any question you think might be stupid or whatever. Just know that these are recorded and they do go up on YouTube. So we've tried to edit out sensitive things and we find that we can't. So we just know that they will go up on YouTube. So don't share, you know, highly personal things that you don't want up on the internet. So to introduce Gabriela, and also Chantal is my co-host. She's here. She's in the glasses with the dark hair, although there are two of them like that. Wave your hand, Chantal, in case people aren't seeing the names. And she's with the Conscious Leadership School in St. Albans. And Kimberly and now I've been made an administrator, hosts the Three Principles in Climate Crisis group on Facebook. That's a wonderful resource as well. That's going really strong these days. So to introduce Gabriela and I met, I don't know, almost 20 years ago when we were in training together at Santa Clara County. And although we're both still in our 20s, so we met when we were toddlers.
We're learning to walk together, holding each other's hand.
We were learning to walk together, and that is because we were in a Three Principles training in Santa Clara County. And that was a very unique experience because we had thousands and thousands of dollars in funding to develop Three Principles programming throughout a very large county system in Silicon Valley. And that meant applications to schools and the jails and corrections and mental health and social services and the general public and drug and alcohol. So Gabby and I have a long experience working in all of these fields with people who are really suffering. Gabriela herself has a personal history that has experienced great times of crisis and chaos and being in the unknown. And she's moved on now to be working in Latin America quite a bit, working with Spanish speakers. She's available as a Spanish speaking practitioner to activists, to Extinction Rebellion, to whoever. And she also does, she goes out to the conference in Spain called Viva every year and does and presents there. So Gabriela, is there anything you want to add, like a website or current work? And actually, everyone, you're frozen right now. Yikes. Is everybody frozen? Oh dear. What's going on? try again.
A lot of government projects. And more recently, I'm working with for-profit businesses. And I have to tell you, it's a delight because I had a very jaded idea of for-profit business. And so it's been really beautiful for me that people are people, you know, whether they are in the for-profit business or in the nonprofit business. And so it's been a huge learning curve for me. And so it's really nice. It's just really nice to see that I had a lot of ideas about corporations or businesses or, you know, certain people, and that has shedded away and really allowed me to collaborate and serve and have conversations with them that are profound. Because I think some of my own biases have melted away. And so that's been beautiful. It's been beautiful and surprising. So I just wanted to share that, Amy.
I sort of went off for a minute. So do we feel covered with your bio?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, great.
That's fine.
So do you want to check in with folks, or do you want to
Yes,
just
I would love to do that. I would love to check in.
anyone who has any thoughts coming into this?
I like that. Yeah, you know, I would love to find out why you are here with us today, because you could be doing anything else, right? You could be having tea or, you know, going out and having a beer with your friends, and yet you're here. And so I would love to find out why you decided to be here with us at this time. Yes, Kimberly, go ahead.
Hello, Gabriela. Hi. Apologies for my croaky voice. Well, I'm here just, I consider Amy and Chantal and Vera a little bit, although I don't know her as well, to be, and Shannon, who's not showing her picture at the moment, but is here. Consider them to be my sisters in this rather unusual, hey Shannon, rather unusual bringing together of the climate and ecological emergency with the three principles. There aren't that many of us at the moment, and so this is my work now. This is what I do pretty much day in, day out, and I run retreats and workshops and have conversations with people who are struggling. So I'm here in support, and I'm here to learn as well. And also to contribute in whatever way I can. Mm. Unfortunately, I also have to be off by 7 because I have a previous call commitment, but yeah, delighted to be here and see you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly, is there anything in particular that you would like to address today?
No, but I'll shout if there is as we go along.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Sure. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Shannon, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? I can move the laptop.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. I loved what Kimberly said. I'm here for basically the same reasons. Prior to coming across the principles in 2015, so almost 5 years ago, I was just really interested in looking at the environment and what we're doing. My degree is in philosophy and environmental studies, and I knew things were fucked when I was doing that. And you know, I got my degree in 2015, and a few months later came across the principles. And for a long time, I saw that if people understood this, it would lead to a deep and connected and wise and truthful relationship to the earth. But I got very disillusioned when I was realizing that although I see that, a lot of people don't. And and this is just my opinion, but I think that, like what you talked about with being jaded about working for profits, is I saw that when I came into this world, I worked as an anxiety coach for about 3 years and just retired from that last summer to focus on this crisis and a different direction in my work. But before that, I was really, disillusioned by the fact that everything in the principals community still seemed business as usual in terms of business. And there wasn't really that connection to the stuff that I saw so connected, and that made sense for me at the beginning, and is why I wanted to be in this conversation and writing books and helping people. So now I'm stepping away to think how I can do that most effectively, and I love these calls. And so I'm here to learn, I'm here to contribute, I'm here to see my own blind spots. And I think if there's any question I have today, it's how can we still hold the spiritual truth that everything is well and everything is as it should be and everything is perfect and we are perfect and we are divinity, with the same truth that we are doing horribly unspeakable things to our earth and each other. And they feel both true to me, but they're paradox. So I love speaking about paradoxes, so anything you see about that would be lovely. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm going to write it down, okay? Okay, anybody else? Paul, do you want to go?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can go. I just was introduced to the principles maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and just randomly saw that Amy posted this Friday environmental crisis talks on one of the 3 principles pages I follow, and I've been feeling very sad and scared about the climate crisis for a while now, and I'm here basically just because I'm seeking out more and more places to just feel that, because it feels like in my everyday life nobody is actually taking it in the way we're fucking everything over. And so it just feels nice to be in some sense of community and some space where it's okay to feel everything about it. So I really appreciate that. And as to what I'm interested in, like I don't know if it's something, if it's a question or if it's something you want to talk to, but to me it's like, for me personally, like I feel a sense of urgency for like not just in saving the world, but in sort of spiritual, my own spiritual development. I feel a sense of like urgency about it now, which is in one sense a gift, and in another sense, not a gift. So if you wanna say something about that, that would be really interesting to hear.
When you talk about urgency, the urgency that you're feeling spiritually, could you tell me just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, you can look at it 2 ways, like both that I feel that my life will be probably at some point a lot more difficult than it is now, as everything happens to the world and society around it. So for me personally, I want to, I don't know, it just has just brought me a sense of urgency that now is the time for everything I want to do on this earth, be it for myself or for others or for the planet in general. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, and difficulty, like, okay, it's time to take action, but difficulty like, oh, gosh, like with a bit of a sting behind it.
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean.
So, when I think there are some things that become obvious to us. It's like, right now it's the time to act. right? And that can be empowering, and it can come with a certainty, right? And you move along and you move along. And sometimes we feel like, oh shit, we better get on it. Oh shit, you know, like that. This is the oh shit kind of a feeling. So I'm wondering, that's what I was asking you. Is it a sense of empowerment? And I guess what I'm hearing is that sometimes it's a sense of empowerment moving forward, and then sometimes it's like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's both. Absolutely.
All right, great. Thank you, Paul. Okay, we have one more person. We have two more people, actually.
I don't mind saying something really quickly. It's really similar to what's already been said, but I noticed that there are times when I feel like this is all I'm thinking about, and then there are times when funny how this happens. There are times when I feel like I'm not thinking about it at all. Then it occurs to me, oh, I haven't thought about the climate emergency. It's an emergency. I need to be thinking about it. So there's I'm noticing something about that. So there's no question, but just that I'm just noticing certain things in my experience, and sometimes guilt for, should I be doing more? What should I be doing? And so I guess the idea of stillness it feels really important to me right now, but it also feels like it's important as a place to come from as well. So I just really want to listen to you and see what I hear at a deeper level.
Great, thank you, Chantal. We have one more participant.
I guess that would be me.
That would be
So I'll just repeat. My name is Melanie. I have been studying nonviolent communication, and I have been lately delving into interpersonal neurobiology, and I'm doing all of that because I've been an activist for about 6 or 7 years now, and I'm starting to lately believe that I'm actually doing harm instead of helping by being an activist. I mean, I think some of it is helping, and some of it seems to be like, even though we're out of time, the rushing around that is happening everywhere feels like harm to me. And I tend to speak up. I can be very outspoken and often perceived as disruptive. And I can no longer have the capacity to absorb that cost. And the loneliness that I feel about it is leading me. There's somebody named, oh, there we go. Is leading me to want to leave the world of activism, at least for now. So that's one of the reasons I came here, out of curiosity to hear how other people are holding all this.
Thank you. Thank you so
Can
much.
I ask where you heard, are you with Extinction Rebellion or PDA? How did you link into
I have been with Extinction Rebellion. I actually just started doing some organizing with the Animal Rebellion in the US. So Yeah, just to clarify, my main background in terms of activism is animal rights activism, which, as I'm sure some of you are aware, is can lead to quick burnout for people. So that is what I'm trying to mitigate.
Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Yeah.
You have a full plate, but I just, and this doesn't have to be for this call. It's just something that's on my mind when you were talking about the corporate world. And I noticed in myself, oh, the activists are going to leave, right? And then one person left, and I thought, oh shit, did he leave because we were saying nice things about human beings in the corporate world? And so that there's just this dichotomy between, like, we're going to Chase today, and some of our activists are like, I don't want to shame and blame Chase. And I thought, well, that's all we're doing at Chase. You know, we're basically calling Chase out for funding fossil fuels. And that is a confrontational kind of energy. And yet we know, I mean, Gabby and I have experienced human beings behaving badly, right? Like, that's also a thing. And that's why a lot of the reason we're here today. So I have this question about activism, and maybe it's a whole nother webinar to do. Like, we could, Chantal, maybe we could create a topic around this, but just how do we both hold the human connection and the compassion for human beings in these systems, and at the same time calling out how these systems, and even some people who maybe just are completely lost, are really damaging, like, our whole capacity to live on Earth. You know, it's like, can you think of anything? It's like a James Bond movie, you know, like you have these guys, it's like, who seem like evil villains at this point, you know, like the ExxonMobil denialist funders or whatever. So that's a thought that I've had, is how do we keep that? It's a fine line, you know, between the personal anger and maybe the impersonal, sort of confrontational, like Martin Luther King used to call people out, you know, and yet he had so much love that was so attractive. And that's, I think, a really huge conversation. It doesn't have to be, I would prefer maybe leave it for the end, and if we get to it, we get to it.
That's interesting, you know, because I actually had a project a while back where somebody invited me to be part of the project, and the company that was a client was the devil. The devil, you know, the corporation, I think they were, it was a huge company. It's a global company. It's a huge company. And it's the kind of company that I was like, I cannot take part of this, right? And it was a very trying time for me. It was a very difficult time, because what I perceived to be the politics and the philosophy of that particular company were opposite to my personal values. And I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I was like this close, saying, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm busy. And I'm telling you this story because for me, decisions like this are very personal and are very spiritual. So I sat myself in a room, and I really tried to get as still as possible. And so when this was happening, when I was trying to get still to see what action to take, there was a lot of ideas just jumping at me, you know? Would I be supporting this? Ethical questions that would just like, you know? And so it took me a while. It took me some time to be able to get still enough to discern what step I could take in pro of the kind of world that I would like to have. And it was hard. It was hard to get still because I had so much opinion about it. And in one of these times of, but I knew this, I knew that I had so much reactivity in my mind that I could not really make or discern a wise choice because I was so reactive. I could feel it in my body and I could feel it in my mind. Unfortunately, the people that asked me to be part of this were patient with me. So I knew that. And I knew that I wanted to make a decision from stillness. And so anyway, in one of the times of stillness, I got the sense of, for things to change, conversations need to happen. And conversations cannot happen when I'm absent. And for things to change, we need to remember what we have in common. We need to have a sense of connection to others. Because otherwise, things just stay. So I went for a week, and I think that was the first time that I started discovering there's no such thing as corporations or systems. There's people. There are people in companies working together, and there are people that move systems, but there's not a system that has life, and there's not a corporation that has life. That was a huge shift, maybe a little disorienting, because we talk about it as, there are systems and there are corporations, but in reality there are people, and these people work there. And so I think that was a big change for me. That was a big change, this idea of I have a humanity that I share with every other human being on earth. And it's very interesting because Amy and I have worked with people that have killed other people in jail. And yet, and done horrible things to other people, little kids, all kinds of stuff. And so Amy and I have experienced connecting with these human beings beyond their behavior. And so I think that was very helpful because I knew that it was possible. I think that was the first step to seeing beyond what got in my way, right? To kind of have the impact in the world that I like to have. So I just want to say that because it was really intense, and it was difficult, and it was challenging, and it was kind of a little bit like, like the guilt, and discerning through the guilt, discerning through all of that. And the only place that I could find discernment was stillness. That was the only place where I could find it. And so what I know is that there is so much frustration right now, and people really believe, wherever you are in this, the people really believe what they believe. And to create connection, and to create dialogue, or to create action, whatever it is you're going to do, it seems like stillness has to be at the center of it, because otherwise, like Melanie was saying, we're just not able to sustain. We're not able to sustain action, conversation, movement, whatever it is we're doing, from urgency. It's not sustainable. So, I want to tell you about this person that really impacted me. He really impacted me. I was listening to a public radio station here in where we live, and they were interviewing somebody that had worked really hard to pass gay marriage. And gay marriage was passed in California, and then I guess it was taken back, right? And then there was like it was put back on the ballot, and he was sure that it was going to pass, that it was going to be fine. And it was shocking because it didn't. And he had been working for this like 20 years, right? And it was shocking. And what happened was that in listening to that interview, they asked him a question like, well, what did you experience when you realized that it didn't pass? He says, I got so quiet. And for the very first time, I wanted to find out why people voted against it. And then what he did really, really, really impacted me. He said, I found people that voted against it, and I went out of curiosity and neutrality, and I wanted to find out what happened. And the reason why that shocked me is because when you feel so passionate about something, and when you see something should be differently than what it is, it's really one of the first things that leaves, I think is the sense of curiosity. We just want to move people. It's like, look, hello, how can you not see this? Right? And what he was talking about is that he developed conversations and he got to know these people. Some people changed their mind and some people didn't. But I realized the importance of when it's an issue this big, the importance of having conversations with people from stillness, because otherwise what we get is the reactivity. Right? So this has been a journey for me, finding stillness in times where things need to get done. And I understand, Paul, I understand the idea of urgency, right? Like, okay, hello, we need to do something here really quickly. And it almost feels like opposite, urgency, like action that needs to be taken very quickly, and stillness. But when I talk about stillness, I don't mean like staying immobile. I mean the sense of stillness in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit. I had a recent experience with this shooting that happened in my town. And we live very close to where this happened. And we could see it from the backyard, ambulances and, police and helicopters and the whole thing. And there was a live shooter at a park, at a festival. And my husband is an ex-police officer, and so we started getting the intel of what was going on. And at one point, we heard that there was another shooter, a second shooter, coming towards where we live. And then in the midst of all of that, one of our friends told us that one of their friends, a couple of their friends, were at the festival, and they just evacuated them, and they had nowhere to stay. And I was in the backyard, and I started crying because it felt so unreal. I come from Mexico City. Mexico City is a huge city. And if you know the news right now, it's super unsafe. And now I live in this little tiny town that I've always felt super safe at, right? And now there's this active shooter, like, I don't know, 2 kilometers from the house. I was melting down because it felt very real. And then when my husband came outside and said, hey, we need to go pick up somebody's friends because they're out there, it was so interesting because I went from total panic and fear and crying to this bubble of serenity in my heart, knowing that I had to move because we had 3 people coming over to our house that had just witnessed the shooting. And I was talking to somebody and I said, I have to go. I went in there, I started making beds, I started cooking, we started preparing. They got there, they were totally, because they saw the shooting, they saw the whole thing. And what happened is I realized that the best thing that I could do for them, I mean, besides, the feeding and all this stuff, was just to listen with serenity and stillness as best as I could. And so they spent the whole time, they spent like a day with us, and it was, I could feel my mind is like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then I could feel this bubble of be with them, just be with them. And I think in the midst of this movement, in the midst of actions that we're going to have to take, in the midst of these conversations that we need to have, there is something very powerful when we come from that. When we come from the quietest, the stillness, the most central part of our soul. It's interesting because I think when we experience that with each other, that quiet, other people can feel it. And we can start having conversations that are difficult. I've had very difficult conversations with my husband because we belong to different political parties, right? And I have to tell you, I'm sharing this with you because I want you to know how personal I have felt it in my life, When the last election happened, I was looking at my husband with the same kind of ideology as I looked at corporations. How can you be doing this? It was really like, and we had this moment where he asked me, he goes, sweetheart, would you like to take a bath with me? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? No, I don't want to take a bath with you. How can you ask me to take a bath with you? It's like, and in the midst of his asking, I looked at him and I saw my husband. I saw my husband and not our ideology and not our actions. Fortunately, what happened? I weave back and forth from my ideology and my feelings and him and seeing my husband, and then also weaving through my ideology of corporations or this and that or that industry or this industry and seeing, these people are people. And when we're able to be still in ourselves and have conversations, you can have difficult conversations and you can take action. But certainly I think the stage of quiet in our soul, I think it's very helpful to engage other people with us. Hi, yes, Amy.
there were a couple of things that I thought when you were talking, and I just wanted to share them because, you know, maybe half the people on this call, maybe less on this particular call, are activists, but these, you know, webinars are going out to Extinction Rebellion, and Deep Adaptation is maybe half activists, but, you know, they're going out. And when you talked about systems and you said, you know, there really is no such thing as a system, there's only people. It occurred to me that really people create systems, right? We create our systems for payroll, and we create our systems of economy, and that the people who are in those systems that we created, you know, and I think we've experienced this together, like in the county system, we begin to believe that the system is real. We didn't make it up, and that we can't change it. It's something we live with, and we can't imagine living without it. And it just occurred to me that when people start to see we created those systems, then there's an opening to, you know, an opening in our minds for a new, well, let's change the system. You know, if this system, you know, is hurting people or hurting the environment or hurting animals, or we can change it. And yet, you know, so, but without an understanding that we created it, you know, then we're not, it feels often, I think, to people like reality, right? So that just seemed important to share.
Yeah.
For anyone listening, even if it's a corporate person, like, oh, I thought that this is the way corporations have to run, or this is the way the economy has to run.
Right.
Really, thank you.
That is such an important point, because, you know, I'm always, I don't know if it's because I'm Mexican, I don't know if it's from Mexico City, and this is the kind of things that you learn in a big city, but I'm always kind of like pushing. Oh, Amy and I have it great. It's a story of pushing rules, you know, pushing the system. We were in this restaurant and we wanted to sit outside, and it was February, and there was this rule about, no, you cannot sit outside until March, because March is when the good weather comes.
Right, but it was 80 degrees.
It was beautiful, right? And this goes to the point of rules are made, right? Systems are created, cultures are created, and then people don't realize that they're not like set in stone, but we often work, you know, function as if they are. And we had a conversation for like 20 minutes with the manager. It's beautiful outside, it's beautiful. And he's like, no, because it's March. March is when, you know, we start having good weather. And so I'm always kind of like, well, why can't that happen? And we've also created programs where, for example, we said, you know, okay, the class is going to last an hour and a half. We came up with that. We created this because it made sense at the time. But like down the line, there's almost something sacred about an hour and a half, right, for a class. So yeah, I love your point. And see, I think that's the part that it's really easy to be blinded to, that the rules and regulations by themselves don't have life. We, people, give that life. And that's like, when I saw that, I realized I have to go to this project, and I want to get into conversation with the people that are working in this particular organization. And I was shocked that they were lovely people. And I was shocked that a lot of the things they did were similar to the things that I did, and that they wanted their families to thrive, and that they wanted their community to be well. You know, I was kind of, I mean, it's kind of dumb that I'm telling you, but I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting something very different, right? Like, oh, I mean, almost really, it's embarrassing, but almost like a room where we're going to sit and plan, like, you know, like the Minions, right? Or something. It's like, this is going to go bad. And they were just like lovely people with families and pets that wanted to have a lovely life, right? So I think for me today, when Amy and I started talking about this, is I think we realize that there is something about really understanding the state of mind or what's happening inside of us and how that impacts our actions and our conversations. You know, you can see it. You can see it. There was just, we just had a impeachment trial, right, not too long ago, and I was listening to it. And so there was the Democratic Party going and talking about it, and then there was the Republicans. And you could tell that when the Republican people were talking, they were talking to the Republican, hoping to convince the Democrats. And when the Democrats were talking, they were talking to the Democrats, hoping to convince the Republicans, and nobody really was listening. Right? Nobody really was like really communicating. And so I just sort of have really personally, and also, you know, just my philosophy in the world, I've seen how important it is to understand the place that we're coming from, whether that's a conversation or an action, right? I mean, it just impacts people because it opens them either to listen to us better or to shut down and resist.
Can I ask you something else?
Yes.
Okay, or maybe just say something and see what your response is, because I think for me, these conversations are really like where, you know, the juice is, you know, and what people need to be thinking about now, right? Because we understand that there is a climate crisis, and we're losing species, and we're losing the forests of Australia, and people in Africa are malnourished, and etc. already. So I want to put this out there and see. I mean, you can respond, anyone can respond, actually. That I think sometimes people in a system like the company that you worked for, or other companies, Monsanto is a big one, or you know, ExxonMobil or something. They are good people, and they are trying to make a living. They're trying to pay the mortgage, and they might develop belief systems too that allow them to be in that role without feeling, you know, without considering our interconnectedness. And so I guess I don't want to discount the role, because this is sort of what I see, is that the spiritual community can sometimes be so into dialogue, and the environmental movement has been trying to dialogue with the corporate world for years, since the 70s, right? Like, and corporations have funded nonprofits, you know, like Environmental Defense Fund, and yet all of this has happened, these sort of partnerships and dialogues, and yet, and still, we're facing, you know, mass extinction of species and possibly an uninhabitable planet. So I feel like there's a role for activism, like, you know, the women's vote, civil rights. I mean, none of these happen through these nice dialogues, right? And I also think, I feel like it's you know, like with this action at Chase today, Jamie Dimon, the CEO, is under a huge amount of pressure, because this is the #1 funder of fossil fuels in the world. And I keep thinking, well, he's got 3 kids. And my friends here in Santa Cruz are saying the same thing. Like, we think that he could change his mind. But how do we present the facts, and how do we put the pressure on? Because I think there is a tendency for people to not want to look, you know, like beyond their own family, which they care about. But then do they care about, you know, what the impacts of like drilling for oil in, you know, an area where people don't have a say about it, and they're dying of cancer, and, you know, like, that's further away, and it's easy to shut that out unless it's presented, right? So I don't know. I feel like for me, sometimes there's a spiritual sense of, well, we're not going to get out in the streets. That's too much. And yet I look out at history and I see how people had to at some point, they just had to. And that was part of the movement in consciousness toward human freedom and human equality. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, I'm not saying that actions, whatever your action you decide to take, it's not a good action. I guess my greatest concern is that it's the well-being of all the people that are working so hard. Because it's like, like Melanie was saying, it's not sustainable. After a while, you're just kind of like exhausted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's perfectly possible to sue somebody, corporation, because it's a corporation. I'm not saying that that shouldn't happen, or fire somebody, or write somebody, or whatever it is you're going to do. I'm just concerned about the health of the people that are working so hard.
Two things that came up for me just in the last few minutes are, on the one hand, we have in the United States a very strange law about corporations being people, being treated like people. And on the other hand, what reason do we want Jamie Dimon to have for changing his mind? Do we want it to be a reason that he can stand behind, or do we want it to be because he was pressured into it and then later he changes his mind when the pressure is off? So it's like the two opposite ends of this spectrum of how are we going to accomplish this? On the one hand, I can't imagine us accomplishing it without seeing Jamie Dimon as a fellow human, as like rehumanizing him. And on the other hand, we also have these concepts about corporations being treated like people when corporations can't behave like people. Corporations don't die, they don't need sustenance, So I think I don't know, I can't imagine us being able to change that corporations are treated like people until we can get the Jamie Dimons and the Mark Bezos and all those other folks of the world to understand that no bunker they build is going to save them. And that, like, to change their ways, not because of pressure, but because of some sort of understanding, like some sort of new clarity. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. This is a biggie, right? This one is the biggie. This is a big one. I think what I know is that if there is a constant state of urgency and stress, it's not going to help. It's just not, And I'm not saying that we shouldn't feel stressed or anxious. That's not what I'm saying, okay? Because that's normal, right? Like, yeah, we can feel, that's fine. I'm just saying that it is important to see the value of operating as people and as individuals and as organizations. From a place that is not killing us, right? Or from a place that is not the modality. The modality has to help us get inspired and move towards action in the best way we can. And so that's why I'm here. you know, I'm here because, like in my own personal life, and you know, when I've been in situations where it's been like an urgent emergency, or you know, like an environmental thing, what I notice is that there has always been people that were impactful, and a lot of that were impactful. Some of these people create havoc almost, and you know, there are other people that their serenity and strength and knowing moves people still in the direction that we want to move towards. Okay, it's still in the direction that we want to move towards. So anyway, you know, I don't know if there is any comment or anything, but even
Can you see the chat box?
no, because I get distracted. If I look at that, I get completely distracted.
I just want to share one comment, and then it looks like Paul has his hand up. The comment was, Greta regained her health and well-being from taking action. And that's an interesting thing that I see a lot of activists who were in a lot of anxiety, who once they said, okay, I'm just going to move, I'm going to do what I can, the anxiety came down. That doesn't mean that everyone's always operating from stillness. I see that too. I think one of the things I've noticed is that there can be pushback from the spiritual community, and I don't mean three principles necessarily, but I've seen a lot of different spiritual communities that, oh, don't feel anxious. It's, like, why are you feeling anxious? And for those people who are following the science, it's like, well, because, it's the fucking end of the world, right? And it's so huge that it's hard for people to take in. Kimberly speaks very well to this, although she's not on the line. And it's an odd place to be sharing that with people, that this is what our trajectory is, whether that's in 10 or 20 years. It's like, I don't want to share this with people. And yet I also see that if we don't understand it, we won't respond. We won't respond as a society or as a world if we don't see what the problem is, and how it's, what the roots are. So there's also a way that people have been kind of shut down in their, I'm feeling really anxious. Oh, it's just your thinking. And you know about that. I know you can speak to that. And then there's this way too where people have become active, and that's helped them. But I also do see that activism can be a way of distracting oneself from kind of accepting that we are here, and that there's a question about, and yet it's also, was it Paul who said there's also this deep okayness too? And that's, to me, that's sort of like the saving grace. Like, this world could end and it might become uninhabitable. And can we also understand that this world is that we're still okay, remarkably, or whatever. There's some release in that. And I want to turn it over to Paul because I don't want to talk too much.
Yes, Paul.
Well, what occurred to me when we're talking about action and urgency and activism is, like, for me, I have no clue whatsoever how to fix the shit we're in. And for me to go out, and I can, go and go to the demonstrations and say, this is a huge fucking problem, but I have no idea how to fix it. And kind of, just taking in the help, and I'm thinking what you're saying, Gabriela, makes so much sense and resonates really well with where I'm at. Because if I go out in the world saying that I know how to do this, like, I have the sense that some activists go with that mindset into the world, that I'm not sure if that's helping from the way I see things. And the urgency I feel is um, I feel this spiritual kind of power or force or stillness, that, like you call it, like I feel it's so urgent to dig into that, or to allow it, or however you see it. But yeah, I just wanted to add that point of that we, as alarmists, or people who try to take this in, we don't really know how to fix it either. And so the only solution I see is bringing more, I don't know what it is, wisdom or whatever, into the world. And if that moves someone to action or to demonstrations, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. How old are you, Paul?
35.
25. So do you remember, like 20 years ago, right? The world we lived in was so different with technology, for example, and phones, right? And the way that we're operating now is like, it's completely different, right? So one of the things that I've observed is human beings are quite resourceful, and we have this capacity for innovation. I worked with another company that was an agricultural company that actually had a sustainability department. And part of their sustainability department, what they created is green groups. They call them green groups. And they met every so often, and they would look at things that they could do within the company to be more sustainable. What I loved about these groups is that they they were formed from cross-section of the company. So it was from like the chief of finance to a person picking the fruit, right? Or like an orange or whatever. So you had one of the teams had the CFO, the chief of finance, and the cleaning lady in the same team. And the cleaning lady was actually the boss, or the leader of that team. And I love that. I love that. And what I saw is what happens when people come together and they feel united. And so one of the things they came up with in one of the particular sites is there was a huge problem with batteries being dumped by the river. This is in another country, not in the US. And one of the people that was picking the fruit, came up with an idea of creating el pilotón. Pila is battery in Spanish, so pilotón is like he made up a little character, okay? And he got a bucket, his own bucket, and he just started telling people, rather than throwing the batteries there, why don't you just come and dump them here in the bucket? And it was through a very, very lighthearted way of doing it, right? And that project took hold through the company. And they were at one point going into the schools to talk to the kids about not throwing the batteries in the river, okay? The reason why I'm telling you this is because there's something that happens when we come together, right? And we start looking in a direction. There's something that happens. It seems like, and I'm not saying that action doesn't need to be taken. That's not what I'm saying, or that you don't need to be calling people out, or that you don't need to be suing people. I think all of that is on the table. But there is something beautiful when we are on the stage of stillness. I mean, there just is, right? And so I feel for us, I feel for people that consider themselves activists when we are inundated by anxiety, because it becomes paralyzing. And it's horrible, right? And so there is a series on Netflix. It's called Inside Bill's Brain. It's about Bill Gates. And Bill Gates apparently can have like 6 projects running in his mind at the same time. And they were asking Melinda Gates, what is it inside his brain like? And she says, it's total chaos. It's total chaos, because he can hold data, so much data at the same time that it's just confusing and stuff. So one of the things that he does is he takes a weekend away often to reflect. And what Melinda was saying is, you know, when he comes back after reflecting, that's when he is the best leader that he can be. And so if you follow, you know, that's just a really great documentary. I recommend it. But one of the things that happened is a few years ago, he was trying to figure out how to have a toilet that didn't utilize water. How could he have a sanitation system that did not have to rely on the kind of system that we have in other parts of the world? And there is this toilet that takes poop, puts it through a whole entire system of filtration, and the result is clean water, drinkable water. So that's the kind of resource that we have. You know, I mean, if you look at humanity, just like we have created systems that have us where they have us now, we also have systems that have helped us as humanity. Is this making sense? This idea that there is a capacity to move forward and to take action, you know, and that we become really powerful, I feel, when there's stillness. You know, and stillness can be, you know, we really need to sue this corporation. I actually know somebody that sued a large organization that I used to work at, because he saw something that was not working well. And he was super calm. He says, you know, I just see that we need to move forward. And he continued to sue them. So I love to know what's resonating for you guys. Yes. Melanie, go ahead.
This has me thinking of this book called Blessed Unrest. Has anybody ever read that?
Mm-hmm.
It's Paul Hawken, the same guy who wrote Drawdown. Is that familiar?
Mm-hmm.
So his previous book was called Blessed Unrest, and he made a parallel or analogy about the planet. If the planet is an organism, then aren't we the cells of that organism? And doesn't every organism have systems that both can fight disease and cause disease? And he made this analogy that humans can do both of those things. And in some cases, that's what we're doing, is like the toilet case, where the sort of, you know, immune response. And in the case of, I don't know, digging for oil, we're the virus. So we're all of those things at once. And it's a really beautiful way to see it. It's one of the analogies and metaphors that has kept me going for as long as I have, because sometimes it's really just a matter of perception. Yeah, which is why I look at the word rebellion now. And at first I was like, yes, we need a rebellion. And I jumped in and was like, yeah, let's rebel. And now I'm saying, like, I'm questioning that. Like, just even listening to your what you're saying about stillness. Like sometimes that's a lot more powerful than rebellion. Not that rebellion isn't also useful. I just don't want to put, I guess, all of my hopes into being anti anything right now.
I think that's beautiful. I think when there is the sense of openness, you know, and freedom, and saying, you know, yes, I can sue you, or I could fire you, or I can say, you know, this really does not make sense, right? You can say it with truth. And the power of stillness.
Not easy.
No, but no, I'm telling you, that's what I started sharing with you, the idea, you know, this really personal example of when I ended up working with that corporation, because it was really a struggle. It was really a struggle, and I didn't damn myself for not wanting to. But what I know is that I know that I am the most powerful when I can hear my own wisdom beyond my opinions, you know? And it's fine, I have opinions because I'm a human being, but I've seen what happens when I operate from that central wisdom that we share as people. I think Elena wants to talk. Helena, I don't know how to pronounce your name.
Helena.
Elena, okay, go on.
I was just going to say that I remember going back a couple of months ago when I sort of first woke up, if you like, to the extent of the climate crisis and the amount of kind of emotion that I was feeling around it, which was anger, anxiety. But I kind of felt like it was an appropriate response to the information that I was receiving, and that I needed to feel that, to then get to a place of feeling more where I am now, which is kind of feeling more at peace with things. But I can't imagine having got to that place without having allowed all of that emotion. But I think it's through like joining this group and doing other things, like not getting stuck in it, but allowing it to be there, because it feels like it feels really appropriate. It doesn't feel like a misplaced anxiety or fear, like it's just a kind of thought, my mind kind of taking over and being overactive. It feels like a really valid response to something that's so kind of huge. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and you know what? I really love that point, because I hope it's not coming. I hope that what I'm saying is not coming across as you should not feel whatever it is we're feeling. I hope it's not coming across as that, because that's not what I mean. You know, even, I mean, to the person that's feeling anxiety, it looks real. Even if it wasn't, you know, like even if it's something a lot more minor. And so I just really don't like the idea that, well, no, this is appropriate and this is not. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it, right? And it's fine. There's nothing to deny about it. So I just love that point, Elena, because, you know, I get anxious, and the last thing that and I get anxious about things that are not really super important at times, right? But when I'm feeling like that, it's not helpful if somebody tells me, well, you know, you shouldn't feel anxious about that. Because to me at that moment, it feels intense.
And I was just sort of wondering, like, what other, and I don't know how this fits into three principles, and it might not do, but just the thought that came up was like,
Sorry.
what was the original purpose of those emotions? Like when we have fear, it was to act in response to something, and usually that was a very immediate fear, a very immediate threat. But I'm just wondering about some of the emotions that come up, and talking about like their appropriateness, whether whatever their original function was, whether it be to act or to, I don't know, I don't know if anyone gets what I'm trying to say and can elaborate on it. I don't know if I said that very well, but yeah.
Go ahead, Amy.
I just, this is just something that I think is important to share on all of these webinars, which is that if people are coming from the positive deep adaptation group, for example, or, you know, even reading the last IPCC report, you know, it is the reality of our situation is that we are losing species, and we're losing them rapidly. And you know, water's drying up, and you know, we may have mass migration. And Jar Jamal, who's an author who came to Santa Cruz to speak, who's done a lot of research on global heating, you know, said to the audience, billions of people will die. Like that, I'm pretty sure of that. And he went into a period of depression for like a year or so while writing the book. And we know a lot of scientists are going into depression and having anxiety because, you know, of what's happening. And so there's one of the reasons I wanted to put these webinars out is because, you know, Kimberly said at one point, this is the biggest fucking 3 principles challenge of my life. You know, like, this is it. This is the biggie. Can we stay grounded? And sometimes there can be a disconnect with some practitioners where, you know, you get the sense they're not really looking at the science, like the Titanic is possibly going down. I don't know. I'm in the unknown about that. I think there's too much. We don't know. You know, some of the projections are not based on a rising up of people, you know, to really, you know, Chase, the bank, just put out a document that basically says all those things. I mean, it could have been written by Jar Jamal or Jem Bendell. Chase Bank is saying at current, you know, trajectory, we cannot guarantee that human life will be sustained on the planet. That's Chase. So I just really wanted these to be also a deep acknowledgement that this is really hard, you know, especially if you have children and you feel responsible for them, or you wanted to have children and now you're thinking maybe I shouldn't have children. Like, it's just so huge. You know, sometimes I say it's not something I ever expected to have to deal with in my lifetime. Like, it's insane. You know, it's like my friends in Santa Cruz are like, what the fuck? You know, it's just like WTF, you know, like this is just too much. And all of us would like for it to not be happening, you know? So someone said alarmist, and I would say, well, that's actually realist, you know, at this point, because Jem Bendell's paper, which is now being sort of verified by a lot of scientists and authors, and is that we actually are too late. And we're going to start to see these collapses. So when we can find, you know, people like Gabriela and Linda, I believe actually understand this about our situation. And me and Chantal now and Kimberly, there's something important about understanding that that's sort of the external physical reality we face. So that people who are experiencing anxiety, and you've been on the calls before, Helena, just, yeah, you know, it fucking sucks, man. Like, it's fucked up. Like, for me, with my kids, I don't know what to tell them. I mean, what my older daughter's like, I'm not having kids. My younger daughter said, well, Mom, you had disco when you were young, and we have a dying planet. You know, these are heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And yet, you know, we don't know. And the reason I'm an activist, this is my little pitch, is because we haven't seen a mass human response. You know, we haven't seen what happens when people, oh shit, you know, someone said about the bunkers, like, even if I build a bunker in New Zealand, I don't know that New Zealand's going to survive. I mean, look at what happened in Australia. We have a woman here who built a permaculture farm. That's where she was going to go to be self-sustaining and live out, you know, this sort of like collapse. And her farm burnt to the ground in Australia. I mean, it's gone. So people maybe are starting to realize there's no place to go. We can't go to Mars. You know, our money's not going to save us. So that's my hope. I guess I just want to acknowledge that, you know, it's hard, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, is because it is hard, and yet the stillness that Gabby's speaking of is available. You know, and there was an activist here who he went on an 8-day meditation retreat, and he came back, and he's an activist with us, and he said, you know, I sometimes am in denial still about the crisis. Like, I find myself getting excited about the projects I'm working on now. And I said to him, that's not denial, that's just forgetting. And that's great. Because, you know, forgetting, it's like we don't really know. And so the capacity to still enjoy life seems so important to me, that we can be present, and there's still lots of animals still, even though we're losing so many so rapidly, but there's still lots of trees. And you know, I don't know, I'm just trying to express a paradox, I guess, that like on the one hand, yes, this is so fucked up, and on the other hand, there's still the principles and the stillness available. It must be so, you know, that's what the principles speak to. And that we can let go of projecting the future, which is what we tend to do with this, and be still. Gabby, do you want to comment on that? Or
Well, there's a question about what are the principles that Melanie has. And I think Melanie, like Amy was saying, if you go back, oh, wait a second, what happened here? If you go back to the first episode or chapter or whatever, you'll be, the second, okay, you'll be able to find out a little bit more about it. But I just wanted to tell you that. If you want to find out more about it, then let Amy or Chantal know. You know, I just have been, like you said, I personally have been in a lot of real, well, nothing like this, but just, you know, intense situations where life to me looked like it was going to happen a certain way. I mean, from very little, from, you know, the time that I was like 11, you know, my dad got murdered, my mom died of alcoholism, you know, I was an immigrant, you know, and it's just like blah, 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 on and on and on, right? And my brother he wanted to be in the army. He went to Afghanistan. This is my only brother. And he wanted to be in the forefront of war. In the forefront of, like, the unit that he wanted to join was at the forefront of whatever, and then he was at the forefront of that. And it did not look good to me. You know, it did not look good to me being an immigrant at 15 and not speaking English so well. It did not look like, you know, with the shooting, and there's just so many things, you know, there's been earthquakes and all this stuff. And I've experienced chaos in a very personal manner. I was telling Amy in preparation to this how I was in an elevator with my mother-in-law, and she started having this respiratory episode where she couldn't breathe. And the reason why I talked about stillness is because what I've realized is that in the midst of chaos, like where my life can be in danger, what's happened is that I've discerned this little bubble that comes like from my soul, and the bubble gives me stillness. And as it bursts, in my mind, I can see more clearly. I can see what to do. It saved my life. It saved my life, and it's allowed me to take the only thing what I realize is this: sometimes the only thing that I need to know is just my very next step. And my very next step is, either calming somebody down, or breathing literally, or stepping out of the way, or moving through, right? Pushing through. But it's been so comforting, and the reason why I value this so much is because I've realized what happens even in the middle of chaos when things look like this is not gonna go well. There's this. I mean, like me and my boss at one point, we were in the middle of a fight, like a gang fight. We were literally in the middle of it, and it was just so wonderful to see that even then, presence of mind can come to the front and be helpful. And that doesn't deny that at times we are feeling anxious and upset and depressed and all of that. I just don't want to take this is right and this is wrong. It's just hopeful to know that that's available to us. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you. And I certainly hope that some of this resonated with you. So thank you so much for having me and for being here today.
We have a comment from Vera. I have to go now. Thank you all, especially Gabby. This was really meaningful to me, despite tech troubles interfering. So yeah, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I feel like there's just always more we could talk about, and maybe another time. And yeah, so we do have to go. And Chantal, do you mind staying on for a minute, and we can just have a little quick chat? Then I have to run and get my disco outfit on.
Send pictures, Amy.
What?
Send pictures.
I will. I'll send you pictures.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much, and be well. All right. Bye.
Okay, I'm going to